This is a little bit different for those that have maybe been a part of a year's past, or this is new for you for the first time. I was really excited to think about, the reason that we do the InsurTech days for the GIA is this emerging InsurTech landscape of companies that the GIA gets to kind of be a part of in different capacities. And so the program you're here for is one of the GIA's programs, and the other program that we run throughout each annual period is an accelerator program, equity-based for 100 days. We've been doing that for 7 years. Applications are open for our 8th program. But one of those companies through the GIA's 2019 program is called Cowbell. And we're going to do a nice deep dive into the growth story of Cowbell with my fellow panelists. And I'm just honored to get to introduce each of them. Dave Miles is the founding partner of Manchester Story, a venture capital firm making early to growth stage investments in companies in InsurTech, FinTech, and Health Tech. Manchester Story is backed by a consortium of leading insurers and other investors. Dave has been an investment professional for the last 30 years. Excuse me, I went off my own script. Dave has been an investment professional for the last 30 years, and in addition to his investment experience, he brings leadership and operating experience to Manchester Story and its portfolio companies. We'll also be joined by Ellen Willitson, who joined Holmes Murphy in 1995. During her more than 25 years with the company, she's played a key role increasing Holmes Murphy's profitability and providing invaluable counsel on major financial decisions. From 1995 to 2021, Ellen served as Chief Financial Officer, assisting in all strategic and tactical matters as they relate to budget management, evaluation of potential acquisitions, cost-benefit analysis, and Holmes Murphy overall vision of growth. And in 2021, Ellen transitioned to the role of Chief Innovation Officer and serves as Holmes Murphy's executive sponsor for Broker Tech Ventures. Also joining us is Trent Cooksley, co-founder and COO at Cowbell. Trent is responsible for the overall strategic direction of Cowbell's insurance operations. As an insurance executive and 3-time startup co-founder, he has held executive, board, and investor roles in all stages of company growth. Trent built some of the first pay-as-you-go insurance technology solutions and has worked with many of the most dynamic insurtechs and carriers as partner or investor. Prior to Cowbell, he was the head of open innovation for Markel Corporation and managing director of Markel Digital. So it is my pleasure to welcome the 3 of you to the stage. We will have some time at the end that we're going to open it up for questions from the audience. So keep those burning questions, and we will come to you as we continue through our discussion. So thank you and welcome. I made a joke as we were preparing for this panel that these were the best chairs we had and they swivel. So I asked for the least amount of swiveling, but I can make no guarantees. I was going to do a little bit of kind of setting the stage before we dive into more of the story of Cowbell. So I joined the Global Insurance Accelerator as its managing director in February of 2019, which was the cohort that Cowbell went through. And it was also pretty timely as I was preparing for this conversation. CB Insights came out with a bunch of research around, on August 4th, a report on 14 emerging cybersecurity categories and 28 high momentum startups with the potential to shape the future of the space. And that included Cowbell in the cyber insurance category. So as I started digging into some of the research, so whether you're kind of in the cyberspace, you hear about it or not, it's been really interesting to me just over the last 2 years What this data shows is back in 2018, the number of lost records bounced from about 6,371 around that, jumping to over 15,432 in 2019. The pace for growth of that, what it's looking at from a trajectory in according to this data in 2020. So the landscape is continuing to change rapidly, which I think we all hear a lot about. The other piece that was pretty interesting is looking at, this is some data from the quarterly InsurTech briefing by Willis Towers Watson, the Q2 that just came out. And in the first half of 2021, InsurTech's raised $7.4 billion, surpassing the $7.1 billion raised for all of 2020 by more than $300 million. We witnessed the largest quarter-on-quarter funding increase since Q3 of 2018, and specifically, global InsurTech funding ballooned to over $4.8 billion, representing an 89% increase from Q1 of 2021 and 210% increase compared to the same period prior year. I get nerdy on numbers, so sorry about that, but it just says a lot about the rapid pace of change that's happening inside of the InsurTech landscape, in addition to what we're going to drill down to a little bit more into on cyber security. So I wanted to kind of set the stage on what's just happened since late 2018 to hear where we are in 2021, and take a trip maybe back down memory lane for a moment. And so it was fun to get to do some preparation with the panel around. We all have some very different perspectives of the journey, representing the accelerator. Trent is a part of Cowbell, Ellen with Holmes Murphy, and Dave with Manchester Story. So that's some of the goal of today, is to share some of that perspective on the growth journey that is Cowbell, going back to in late 2018, Jack Cudale, the founder, applied to be a part of the Global Insurance Accelerator. And so I wanted to kick off by talking to Trent a little bit about, how you got involved and what was like, the idea, the state of Cowbell back at that period of time, and then on a go-forward basis as you got more involved.
Yeah, so thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. It's fun to be with a lot of people. So in 2018, I was actually lucky enough to be on the board of the GIA. So I was on the selection committee of looking at the cohort that was coming in, and that's where I met Jack, because he had applied, and we went through the process. I don't remember exactly what it was like, but there's a lot of meetings. So there's a lot of applicants, there's a lot of applications, and it's hard for all the board members to be a part of every single meeting, and some of them are bigger and than others. And when we got off the phone off his pitch, I don't remember who it was, but someone was like, I didn't understand what he was talking about. There was a lot of cybersecurity that was very technical, and my thought process was, well, this is a really emerging risk area, so I'd like to move forward with the next step for this. And I believe, kind of we went through it, Cowbell was the last entrant to the GIA. So I pushed it through a little bit, and at that time I was very engaged with the work that we were doing at Markel, and it's fun to see some of my Markel former colleagues here. Good to see you guys that are carrying it on. Great work, by the way. And so we were really focused on that. But as we got through the cohort, I was, I'd been talking to Jack, and in the spring of 2019, it was, I was professionally, it was kind of my time to do something different. So I had kind of given some notice that, a long-term notice that I wasn't going to be around. And Jack was very good at engaging with the GIA and the board members. So that's some advice I would give to folks who want to go through the accelerator, is take a tip from Jack on how to work it, because he really worked it. And really talked to a lot of people. And as we kind of went through this process, one day he said, hey, you want to sit down and kind of talk about what you would do if you were where I'm at right now? And I said, yeah, let's whiteboard it. And so that's the whiteboard that we did. Anything that you can read on there is what Jack wrote, and anything that you can't read is what I wrote. And so that was kind of setting the stage on this evolution of where the idea came from to where it went. And later on, Jack kind of looked at me and he said, "Well, you're not really going to be doing anything this summer, so why don't you join me?" And I contemplated for about 12 minutes, and I said, that sounds like a plan. I'll join you.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that. I also, I kind of joined, I missed the part of that, the beginning part of that when I joined, and then, the thing I do really remember well is, you said, like, as Jack worked the mentors, there's a unique opportunity for anybody in this room that most of the people here care about the industry and they want to help InsurTech companies. And so Jack did a phenomenal job during our program of reaching out to people, seeking the insights that they have from the lens that they carry to help ultimately kind of shape the path forward. I also remember, so our program runs January through April, the finest time in Iowa every year. And Jack came from California. So we were fortunate that Dave started an annual tradition for the GIA that he invited the cohort out to his home on the farm. And we had a lot of folks who that was a first-time experience for them. And then COVID hit. So our annual tradition has been once, but we are going to get back to that annual tradition, we hope, in 2021. But that was around, like you heard the pitch from Jack first around April 9th, and then we had the event at your house a week later. And then the timeline from there looks like April to September of 19, this concept stage company announces a $3.3 million investment led by Manchester Story Group. So what was that like for you, Dave, in terms of meeting Jack and this idea of Cowbell in April to the decision to invest and lead in that kind of short time frame?
Thanks, Nicole. It was quite a ride, and it's been a great ride ever since. One of the things that we do, and I think it's pretty common among venture firms, is that we all type our notes into laptops, and it all goes into, in our case, OneNote. And so here are my notes from the first meeting. They're still out there anytime we need them. So at 9:45 on Tuesday, April 9th, we sat down. And had a great visit. And this would be reams and reams of additional information, of course, since. But the interesting as I go back and look at the notes, it's pretty easy to piece together what intrigued us and what developed from there. And I'll just fill in a couple of other data points in terms of the timeline. So we had that meeting on April 9th. We were able to get together with the entire cohort, which is wonderful, the next week. On June 20th of 2019, we had signed a term sheet with Cowbell, and we invested on July 26th of 19, and then it was announced in September. We are an early stage, as Nicole mentioned, we're an early stage lead investor, primarily in InsurTech. We can do some things in FinTech and HealthTech and occasionally do, but we're really focused on insurance. We've been active with the GIA since it was founded and are very proud of that relationship. We're successful because of our network of insurance relationships, and they were critical in evaluating Jack and evaluating Cowbell. In fact, in my notes, I mentioned to Ellen, is a call that I made with Ellen to say, is this going to sell? Where do you think things are going to go? But to get back to the initial question, so what were we impressed with in the very first meeting? A primary criteria for us is the strength of the founding team, and in Jack, and you weren't yet part of the founding team at that point, but we knew Trent. I'd known Trent longer, but I didn't know him in this capacity yet. But Jack had run 2 cybersecurity firms, so he understood cyber very well. It was his 4th startup, the first one that he was launching. He had a very clear So he had a good background. He'd had a lot of success. He knew how to. It was clear he was incredibly well networked. I don't know anybody that took greater advantage of their GIA their time with GIA to get networked. And he had a very clear roadmap for where he wanted to take the company. And again, as I look at the roadmap that he described, not everything happened. Not everything happened in the same time frame, but not far off. And a little behind and a little over budget is way under budget and early in venture, because it just never happens. There's always more things than you think are going to happen. So those things were all very impressive to us. He'd already recruited a CTO and a COO at the time. We quickly had conversations about insurance and his lack of experience there. And he assured us that no names mentioned immediately, but that he was having real serious conversations there, because that was important for us too. We thought, you have so many of these other pieces, but you don't know anything about insurance. You need somebody that knows it incredibly well. And of course, he was able to recruit to the founding team, Trent. So I could go on further, but hopefully that gives you a feel for the things that got us interested. Clearly, the other thing I'll mention is clearly the market size and the potential. Cyber was not new in 2019. And in fact, one of the questions we had to answer was, with loss ratios being as low as they are, who wants somebody to come in and fix a problem that nobody has? Everybody's making good money. Our thesis at the time was, this won't last. Folks, by and large, really don't know what's in their book as well as they should. And the approach, the technological approach that Jack and team were going to take, we thought would provide much better exposure and visibility into the real risks. And I think they have, and it's proving itself out. So that was the start.
Yeah, that's good. In my continued trip down, kind of piecing the story together, I found an email, Ellen, from Jack that was in May of 19, so maybe somewhere lurking around this time. I get an email from Jack that says, "Hey, I'm coming back from California. Do you think you could drive me to Holmes Murphy?" So, sure. So it was May of 2019 that I remember actually joining Jack in your offices, Ellen, with you and Dan and Susan for his first pitch, I think, to you and the Holmes Murphy team. And I was hoping you could maybe just kind of building upon what was going on in and around that time, some of the questions that you guys had. Do you remember kind of what stood out in some of those early conversations with Jack around Cowbell?
Well, some of the things that stood out about Jack and Cowbell were really, I remember him bringing visuals which was great. He was very defined related to what industries he was going to focus on and what the opportunity was. So he laid out a plan for us very clearly. But the other thing we learned that he mentioned as he did work his network is that he was connecting with Manchester Story, and that we knew Dave and Matt and were very comforted by that and excited about their participation. So at Holmes Murphy, we were very interested in identifying risks for our clients earlier, and Jack's concept met that. But as I said, he really did lay out a plan for what we thought could be a business that would come to fruition and drive the industry forward in a very fast manner.
Was at that time, so this is still in 2019, were those types of strategic investments something you and Holmes Murphy were doing, or was that the first of its kind?
We had done several prior to this one, but it was definitely on the early end of our investing in startups. Prior to that, it was primarily in healthcare that we were investing.
I was gonna, we have, for those that want to see a little bit more about the journey and milestones, I'll put that up behind us as we continue our discussion. But a lot of impressive milestones in a rapid time frame for the Cowbell team. So Trent, I want to come back to you so here we are, the seed round has been raised, you've been brought on board, the tech is being built. Like, what are you doing during that time to help prepare the company for the technology, launch period?
Well, I mean, right away, the first thing that we needed to build products. So, I mean, when we raised that money, we still really only had a three-page deck. And we really started putting fingers to keyboards, getting the right engineers in place. And then we started putting fingers to keyboards in about August of 2019. So, I mean, the first couple of months was defining the requirements and setting the deadlines that we wanted to hit internally. I mean, that was really critical for us. We set deadlines, and we never moved those deadlines. There was no excuses for the deadlines. We had big timers in the office where we said, count down to this, count down to that. Now, we didn't always hit them, but we always stuck to them. So nothing that came out or a setback would put us in a position where we said, well, let's just change the deadline. That was never acceptable. And so then the next thing was really like starting to sell, which was hard because we didn't really have a product, and we still really just had a PowerPoint. So it was really just really leveraging our network, going out, maybe identifying the talent that we wanted to bring in, making sure that our requirements were hit on the product. And so we had two products, right? We're building an insurance product, but we're also building our cybersecurity intelligence product. So our risk rating factors, the data science that goes into that. Bringing all the data, cleansing it, making sure it was, it was appropriate. So I spent some time trying to sell a product that didn't exist, and just getting told no quite a bit. But we had the right people in the network who did give us the time. We went to Holmes Murphy and stole a bunch of people's time and made them sit with us and ask lots of questions, and got market feedback. And then really prepared for the timing of the launch. At the same time, we had to put together capacity, so we needed to go get an insurance carrier, we needed to get reinsurance. So I spent a lot of time talking to a lot of folks in that space to bring those folks together as well.
And our team loved meeting with you, and it was an exciting time for everybody. Although we hadn't been investing in individual InsurTechs, we had developed some internally and had an entrepreneurial spirit, and with several of our people involved, as you know, as mentors in the Global Insurance Accelerator. And we really enjoyed working with your team and helping to form some of those things.
Well, and Holmes Murphy was very generous with their time, which is important, especially as kind of starting out. If you really have to have engaged investors. Somebody has to say yes to you, right? And you have to have kind of engaged mentors, and Holmes Murphy was really critical of that at that period.
Oh, and I was curious in terms of maybe in this journey period, what was maybe more on the inside of Holmes Murphy, and starting to think about where does Holmes Murphy fit in from a commercial relationship with Cowbell, and maybe some insights for what that looked like.
It was very early on. Susan Hatton, who's in the audience today, introduced us to Jack initially, and you were kind enough to drive him out, Nicole. So it started with Dan and Susan and I meeting him, but then we were virtually in the middle of a common area, so people were walking by, and we were pulling in our cyber experts as they walked by to hear Jack's story and get excited about the solution. And then those early months in particular were more around helping how the forms might be written, what the coverage should be, what experts, the same type, just talking to you about that, I believe, Trent. And then the investment opportunity, and then just staying connected now from a distribution perspective as the product has matured.
Yeah, and I was lucky enough at Markel. I had made investments, was trying to input them into the corporate area. That's a challenge, right? I mean, we talk about it all the time. The GIA talks about it all the time. How do you inject innovation into a corporation? How do you engage with maybe the CVC and then the actual unit that's working the business? So kind of being on the other side, I would understand if someone at Holmes Murphy thought, well, I've got other things to do, and so really appreciating that time and the value that you can get out of that was important.
So the next kind of part I was going to touch on, and I think I might actually take a few moments soon. If anyone wants to ask some questions of us, we can do that. But rounding out the timeline, kind of building on all of the distribution and the growth and the launch of the product. So it was March of 2021 that the Series A was announced, $20 million led by Brewer Lane Ventures, with participation from existing investors as well as some new investors, one of which is a GIA company in Markel. Dave, I was hoping that you could help us, us being the audience, think about kind of the investors' perspectives on what did the team need to be doing during that time to go out and make that kind of raise? And then certainly any perspectives that you each have on that same timeline, I think help our folks kind of get a sense of what it's like. Everything's moving so quickly and you're going out and making that kind of raise.
Sure. I think the key, well, first let's go back. So the company was founded, and the first thing that had to be done was build the tech stack. And that was one of the milestones that we were funding. And the commitment was to build it in 6 months, which the company did. Although we all got started later, I think the idea was to get started by about June, but by the time the funding came together, it was September. And I think it's worthwhile. I will get to your question real quick on what needed to be done in order to get a successful Series A raised. But you'll notice in the timeline that we're looking at here, we go from September to 2019 to, let's see, I guess we're coming around. All right, so then we go to, I went around it the wrong way. So we go to February of 2020, September of 2020. By February of 2020, the tech stack was built and the initial product was ready to go, and distribution had started to be built. We all know what happened in March of 2020. And I think that's important to focus on, because for a company that was building an amazing new product built around machine learning and artificial intelligence to really continuously underwrite and understand what the ongoing risks were of cyber for their customers and being ready to go to market, just the distractions that were caused as COVID hit created some real challenges. So what the company needed to do in order to get a successful funding toward the end of 20 into the beginning of 2021 was to demonstrate that the tech stack worked, that the product was right, and that the distribution network that they had built, and Trent was the lead, of course, on that, could all function and generate premium and top-line revenue. And I think there was just nothing more important for that next round of financing than being able to do that. And because of COVID, it was mid-year, I would say June of 2020, the wheels were turning, but they weren't throwing off a lot of revenue just yet. So that last 6 months of 2020, it was really critical to do that. And the company did that. I mean, once everybody kind of looked up and said, all right, life's going to go on, the brokers were back connecting to their customers, and the sales group that Cowbell built was able to go out and make the calls. Then they could demonstrate premium growth, top-line revenue growth. The loss ratios were not an issue really at that point at all. The distribution network had been built, and they could demonstrate that the product was attractive. So that their first product was attractive, and then able to launch the second Prime 250 in September. So new product, top-line revenue growth, and continued capacity and good performance of the book all set them up very effectively for a Series A raise.
Little color.
Yeah.
That's important. So we launched our product on February 7th in 2 states. Obviously, there's a lot of regulatory work that has to go into that. And we wrote 2 policies that day, and there's a lot of high fives and cheering. And then we didn't write another policy for a month. And so there was a lot of crickets after that. And then, of course, we all know what happened on March 10th or whatever the date
Right.
was. And so, yeah, February, March, April, May, June, those were difficult months. But you know what we did is we kept building. We said, keep hitting the goals. These are the deadlines we set. We're going to keep trying to hit the deadlines. We were probably in a little bit of an advantage situation where we were already kind of distributed. So there was really no disruption to our day-to-day. I was in an office with one other individual, Jack and Rajiv were in California, and so we were kind of already distributed. But a lot of other people were disrupted pretty significantly, and quite frankly, didn't want to hear our sales calls at that time. So it's actually really important to mention that because we had to make up what's the contingency plan for this, and how are we going to work through that. We kind of kept the same tack, right? You go to bed at night, you get up the next morning, and you go back to work, right? And you just keep trying to get the wheels turning.
One of the things we pulled up here, Trent, as a part of like our own dialogue and preparing for this, and some of the feedback is that it's really important to have a heartbeat, and like that your company's having, that your team's having, investors are seeing, and this was one of those very early dashboards that kind of kept everybody on the same page. I think through each of those moments that you all just described. So as teams are building, think about how you're communicating the different KPIs or internal metrics that matter towards different milestones. All right, I'm going to, Megan there has a microphone. What questions do folks have for anybody on the panel? None?
It's a bashful group. While we're waiting for questions, one of the things I would fill in, because it sounds like Cowbell has been just straight up and away, with the exception of, you mentioned selling a policy and then not selling another one for a month, which I was acutely aware of at the time. One of the things that no company advertises probably is, but it's the case that in Cowbell we had capital to fund the milestones of getting the tech stack built, building a product and a distribution network, and we thought we'd get some traction going. That would set us up well to raise a round. Well, for not nearly as long as it might have been, but for a period of time, the venture capital market just sort of closed down. It was pencils down for most folks. And that was right when Cowbell needed capital. One of the things that we did, what we did, was initially folks around the table that had invested in the Series Seed stepped up, but then we were joined by Avanta Ventures and by Markel, came in and said, what this team, this market, this execution, we believe in it. And so it was one of the easier bridge rounds that we've ever been a part of. But that bridge round was really what got us all through March, April, May, June. I mean, really got us to the end of the year, into the beginning of this year. But it was not difficult because of the track record of executing on the things that the company said they would do that they could control. And COVID they couldn't control. But so just so there's Jack and I talk at least every 2 weeks, and it's not infrequent that we talk about sort of the hurdles that were overcome during the last 2 weeks, and it's gotten to be a little bit of a joke that we solved 81 hurdles the last 2 weeks, and So this particular one we're trying to figure out today, we'll figure that out as well. And that tenacity of the whole team, which is now, is the team pretty close to 100 people now?
Yep, 92 to be exact.
92 people today, from, four co-founders? Four co-founders. It's remarkable what they've built. But so there is, a little rain has fallen in the life of the company too. It's not all been sunshine.
And Brewer Lane leading our Series A, our first meeting. Now I knew Martha and had known Chris at Brewer from a co-investment and just previous engagements. But we started really pitching Brewer in October of 2019. So that was the first time we met with Chris Downer and sat down and kind of went through with him. So that kind of gives you, kind of some timeline on how long we had been in communication with Brewer. So they had been following what we'd been doing. We'd been giving them updates. Another thing Jack does extremely well, and Dave, you correct me if I'm wrong, but he's very good at updating the board, updating the stakeholders of the organization, and updating the potential stakeholders of the organization. So we're keeping them engaged in what we're trying to do on a monthly basis and bringing them in. Here's what we've done, just FYI, and we did that with Brewer, and I think that was helpful in closing the A round fairly quickly in March of this year.
Terry. Now it is.
Okay. I remember meeting with Jack when he first came into the Global Insurance Accelerator. And and where he is today is quite different from the vision that he had in the beginning. So there was a process there, and Trent, I'm hearing that you had a major part to play in that process. I'm wondering, and he's a very unique, special person who uses his talents and has an open mind and was clearly trying to figure it out. But was the process one of an evolution, or was it an aha when you sat down with him? How did he get from where he was when he came in to something that was really, that could be commercialized by the time he came out?
Evolution, 100%. Lots of conversations. How do you take it this way? Do you take it that way? If you kind of go back to that whiteboard session, I think that was right before he met with you, Dave. I believe that was the timeline. And so that was kind of us really digging in after months of more advisor, GIA advisor type conversations, and whoever else he was talking with. And I was like, well, here's kind of like how we could structure this on taking this, what we've got now, to actually being market from my standpoint, right? And then he would come in and say, well, from where I was coming here, and so there were a lot of conversations with that. But I think once we got to July, we were pretty clear on exactly where we were going to take it. This is what we're going to do. Here's the company. This is the model of the company. And these are the milestones that we're going to hit. So I would say the first 6 months, there was some evolution. And I think that comes from also, again, the initial pitch was very cybersecurity focused. And am I selling a platform? Am I selling a SaaS product? And there was, confusion, not confusion, but maybe not an understanding from the insurance side of how does it mix with what I'm doing on a daily basis, and we heard that. I heard it in the board meetings, and we talked through that. And from my standpoint, I believed that there was a lot of value in solving a problem. So, and that's the other thing that we believe that we're doing at Cowbell is cybersecurity merged with the risk transfer portion of it is actually a really big worldwide problem. It's impacting every business, and we kind of come in every day and we talk to our team about what we're doing is important. It matters to your colleagues, it matters to your peers, and it kind of matters to the safety of our nation. And we really believe that, and we think there's challenges to be solved.
Thanks, Terry.
Hi, this question is for Ellen, actually. So I'm curious about from Holmes Murphy's perspective. Corporations, I think that the alignment of objectives to partner with startups are easier said than done. How do you find the right kind of secret sauce to make that relationship successful? But I think that there's opportunities there for startups and corporations to partner, but that could also be kind of detrimental to the startup if the corporation doesn't partner up correctly. So I'm curious about that.
Well, first, I think, to Trent's point, I think you need to believe that there's a problem that's going to be solved. And the cyber area was definitely ripe for that in those days. Secondly, you need to trust, have confidence in, and like working with the team. And I think that made the relationship with Cowbell Cyber very easy as well. And then, once you get the momentum going and you realize that you are making the lives of your clients better, that is the magic that brings it all together.
Hey guys, I think it's a great case study for the GIA and Des Moines and what Iowa can do in the startup space, which is why I come here all the way from Chicago. But Dave, my question's for you. So many startup founders come to me and say, well, why can't I have such a great idea, why can't I get that $3 million of funding or whatever? And you mentioned two things that I'd just like you to expand upon if you could. The roadmap and the detailed roadmap. And could you describe what that was or what you saw that differentiated it from everybody else or other startups that you talked to? And then also, how important was the discussion with Holmes Murphy or other potential customers in your confidence that this business with no revenue at that point was going to go somewhere?
It's a really good question because while we do Series Seed and Series A is always much more comfortable because there's a product in market. There are a few reference customers. We talk to those reference customers. They either rave about the product and the company and say they've changed my life and they're incredible to work with, or we move on. So that's so much easier than this. We invested here, as you say. There was initially just Jack, and then in the San Francisco airport I met his CTO, and then Trent came on, and so it grew, but still it was basically a group of folks with a business plan, and that's much harder. So what gave us confidence? Now I want to make sure I remember both parts of it. So, and then how did we get the confidence? All right. So the first thing that gave us confidence, if I look back at my notes, he said, the goal is to get a capital commitment for 3 milestones. First is to hire a team of software engineers and get a software product out the door by September, and an insurance program by January of 2020. The second is to get a carrier behind him with fronting paper and capacity, and he talked a little bit about what they were doing there. And the third, I think those he said, I wrote 3 milestones, but I think those kind of collapsed into 2. That those are the 2 things that they were going to do with the money. I guess distribution. I know distribution was the third one. So it was to get the product built, get capacity on the insurance side. Now, is that profound? Perhaps not. I mean, you need all of those things. But then he went into greater detail as to that persuaded us that he understood cyber very well, and that he thought there was a better opportunity for cyber insurance than cyber, where he said, I know all the companies in cyber, and there's already too many. The world does not need another cyber company. The being able to call and get references from people that we know and trust in insurance was invaluable, and always is. Again, I mentioned one of our early calls was to Holmes Murphy and to Ellen. I've got notes here of my conversation with Terry Vaughn, and like I said, I didn't print it all off, but I remember we made a whole series of calls with folks that we knew at the reinsurers to understand how they viewed it. We didn't know a lot of folks in the actually in the cyber market per se, so I don't remember exactly what we gleaned there. But it made a huge difference in terms of validating, in our view, that there was a market there. So no one should get the idea, and I'm trying to think about what are the lessons one can learn from this. No one should get the idea that even though the team was impressive and the market was really interesting, that alone was it. We made dozens of reference calls, some of them specifically on the individuals involved, to make sure that they're good human beings, but a lot of it just on tell us about the market, tell us how you view it, before we made the decision to invest.
Thanks. Hi, Trent. I'm always fascinated by the story of the founders and the teams. If you look back the last couple of years, what did you actually get wrong, and then how did you rectify that in order to kind of help grow the company to the level you're at now?
We got a lot of stuff wrong, but we were lucky in getting some of the big things right. So we made some tactical errors in kind of the structure of software early on, and we had to patch that up. But we were lucky enough to have a really strong engineering team that does amazing work. So I'd say some of those were smaller blunders, but they were easily overcome. I think we were lucky in not making any big strategical errors. But at the same time, the one thing is, like, when we made a decision to do something, that was the decision that we made. There wasn't going back. There wasn't any changing it. We had to move forward from that. So there's a lot of burn the ships, right? This is the decision. We come to the decision. Now we're moving on and to execute on that decision. One of the things I think we did right is we've done a really good job of being really thoughtful of the people that we've brought on. Obviously, with 92 people, this is not just 4 of us sitting in a room. In fact, we do very little of the important work that's going on. And we have, of our initial 10, 11 hires, 10 of the first 11 are still with us and really, really engaged in what we were doing. We probably looked at how we were going to open up states. If we went back in time, we might have looked at that a little differently. We might have looked at some of our roadmap things differently. But I mean, if I had to have anything back, I wouldn't go back and change anything.
One of the critiques when we were doing the bridge round about the company, and Trent, I don't think you and I have ever talked about this, but it came up in board meetings, was that the first product out of the chute was a small business product, and the average premium size was not very big, and so you just had to write a lot of that product to really generate much revenue. But the 2 things about it that I liked, one was it was a great sandbox to build, and second, that's not that any company of any size is immune, but that's not the highest and best reward for somebody that's good at cyber hacking a business. And so these were not businesses. I think the loss experience on that Prime 100 product has remained, pretty phenomenal. So, and today it runs on pretty high-tech rails. I mean, I don't know how many new Prime 100s policies you write a day, and there's some cyclicality to the business, but it is a nice base on which additional products you've been able to build.
Yeah, it was, and that was a big strategic decision that we had made early on, and maybe questioned it when we weren't getting any volume in the spring of 2020. But again, kind of going back to just doubling down with where we were, we just doubled down with where we were at because we saw the opportunity on the wall, and what are you going to do? You're going to stop? You can't stop. You have to keep going.
I was thinking about a question that was asked, so I hope I'm not going to overstep or put you on the spot, but I remember a conversation or two with Jack where, and I think in his words, you said no a few times before you said yes. And maybe that wasn't real or it was different, but I'm curious just for the advice to an entrepreneur of engaging with an investor on, I think the comment you made, and from my own experience, I think founders who do a really good job of providing updates against what they said they're going to do goes a really long way to keeping someone engaged in the process. I'm just curious if that was kind of any part of that early journey, or maybe Jack was just, that was maybe not completely accurate in spirit.
No, that's accurate. We have never said yes the first time to any entrepreneur. But it's also not a game.
Right.
It's not a test.
Right.
It's extremely unlikely, and I doubt that you have either said yes the first time, but maybe you have. But there's just so many factors that the first conversation we ever have with an entrepreneur is a half hour. And you cannot begin, and then we sit down and we decide whether we're having another one. And so we have folks on our team that their life there's divided into, it isn't 80 half-hour conversations a week, but sometimes it can feel like it's that many, and there's no way to get all the answers, and so you just you're just never going to be at yes to begin with, and it can feel like, so you do the second call, and then maybe that's 45 minutes or an hour, and then you make some reference calls with people whose judgment you trust, and then you have another conversation, and the entrepreneur says, they like me, they really like me, and we do. But then we come up with 17 other questions because we've peeled back the layers of the onion. So what he says is true. Ellen, what's your process like?
We said no a lot as well. Jack, one of the attributes of Jack that I think has made him very successful is just his persistence, and persistence in a positive way.
Yeah, I remember you saying there were lots of updates to you along the way in a very short amount of time, but in a good way.
Correct.
Yeah, to be a successful entrepreneur, from the funding to having the right idea to the execution. One of the reasons I love what I do is that it's so incredibly hard to do. And one that we haven't talked a lot about is the emotional intelligence to deal with the ups and downs. Because it's another thing in our business. Until we've funded, we haven't funded, and there, I think we're honorable people, and we're straightforward, and we try to do our best to be transparent with folks, but we're constantly evaluating until a deal is actually done. So there's a lot of ups and downs, and then you get to run the business, and there are a million ups and downs there. So.
All right. Any last minute or last words anyone wants that we didn't get to? Otherwise, I greatly appreciate each of you joining us. Thanks for the audience participation. It's great to get your questions. Let's see here. We have a 15-minute break. It's 3 o'clock. You can grab water, soda, come back to the table, and then we're going to get started with the featured company presentations. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.